Bronwell. Welcome back to Before Dieting. And I want to say hello to our many new listeners and thank those of you who've been sharing the podcast with friends. I really appreciate it. It's part of why I do this work. I care deeply about pushing back against diet culture's message that weight loss is simple, that everybody can do it, and that if you can't, you must be lazy or not trying hard enough. That messaging drives me crazy because weight regain isn't simple. It's complex and there are many interacting parts involved. And the more women we can bring into these shame-free conversations about weight, the stronger that shift becomes. And really, that's what this podcast is about. Today, I want to set the scene for the next 10 episodes. We're going to be telling stories about 10 women. I've chosen these stories from those 1,000 conversations I had when I was forming the Waiting for Happiness project. Before we begin, I want to give you some context about the women that you'll meet in those 10 episodes. Firstly, they were all between 45 and 65 years of age. They were all experienced DIY dieters, having had multiple rounds of weight regain. None of them had any diagnosed eating disorders or any health concerns. In other words, they were all regular, ordinary women getting on with their busy lives while using diets to try to solve their weight problem. So as you're listening, there's probably a good chance you already recognise yourself in some of those descriptions. So let me go a bit deeper with what else they had in common. They all had a go-to diet and one that they knew that they could rely on to drop a few kilos and feel in control again. But then once they'd all hit perimenopause, their dieting go-to stopped working. So that's where the commonalities ended. If they'd gone off to seek help from somebody about their weight, depending on who they asked, their weight regain was framed as a medical, motivational, nutritional, hormonal, or a fitness-related problem. And if their weight gain was a one-time thing, that framing might help. But as the name implies, weight regain isn't one time. So one of the things we'll explore in this series of 10 episodes is the difference between a weight gain event, something that happens once with a clear cause, and weight regain that keeps happening despite your best effort. Because these things are not the same thing, and treating them as if they are can create some unintended consequences. When a complex weight problem is treated with a simple dieting solution, the system adapts, and in fact, it pushes back. So dieting leads to compensatory eating, which leads to weight regain, which leads right back to dieting. It's a loop. And sometimes when you go around that loop, extra weight is added on top. So let me give you the contrast to make sure we're clear about what is a one-time event versus weight regain. And I want to tell you about Jennifer. She was 40 and worked in healthcare. She was very active. She played netball. She rode a bike to work. Her weight was stable at a level she felt comfortable with because her intake and her activity pretty much balanced out. One day she went on a bushwalk and had a fall. It was a complicated ankle fracture that required surgery and pins and 4 months off her feet. Of course, sport stopped immediately, and in fact, most of her physical activity dropped to almost nothing. Throughout her recovery, she continued to eat as she always had. And of course, she gained just under 10 kilograms. Once she had recovered and she was able to resume some of her usual activity, she made some modest dietary adjustments. And after a few months, her weight had returned to pretty much where it was. So for Jennifer, the cause and effect are clear. Activity was reduced, her intake remained unchanged, and she gained weight. It's a single event and a circumstantial weight gain. Now, if we compare that to Yulia has been dieting for 30 years. And across those years, she has lost more than 100 kilograms in total. The problem is it's come at 10 kilograms roughly at a time, and each round followed by regain and often with a little bit extra added on top. Her current weight is 20 kilos more than when she started her first diet at 18. Yulia treats each round of dieting as a separate event. And for each one, she would always have a particular reason that particular dieting effort didn't work. Like she would actually say it was the diet, or she just didn't stick with it long enough, or she just needs to try harder. But when we mapped her full history, she was shocked to see how many cycles she's actually been through. She didn't know why the weight kept returning. And this is where systems thinking becomes important. Where Jennifer had a broken ankle, she had an event. Julia has a pattern. Jennifer's weight gain had a visible starting point when she broke her ankle. Julia's weight regain is being generated by an underlying eating system, one that's been built over time and it's been shaped by dieting. And this reinforced by restriction and, of course, ending up with relief eating. So the key point is that simple solutions work for simple imbalances like Jennifer's. But when weight regain is being driven by an established system, another diet doesn't dismantle it. In fact, it activates it. So it's the differences with weight regain that we're going to be examining in these stories that will follow over the next 10 weeks. And hearing about it through other women's stories will help. Because when you're living inside a weight problem, you have blind spots. And when you try to solve the problem while standing inside it, it's like being in the middle of a maze and insisting that what's in front of you is the whole map. You need help to expand your view, and stories can help you do that. Another reason to listen is because women are often kinder to others than they are to themselves. And in stories, you can empathise with the complexity and understand it without turning it into a moral judgment. But I want to point out that what these 10 stories won't offer is another dieting solution, because repeating weight gain isn't a food problem, it's a life problem with a long history. And that's really what I want to make the season about, is that making that history visible is important because you can finally start at the right place. The 10 stories will start next week. If someone you know is stuck on the dieting roller coaster, please tell them about the series. It might be a kind gesture that lets them ease up on their self-judgment. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk with you next week.